Okay, here we go again. That escalated quickly, didn't it? For those of you who've been avid observers of the World War III updates over the years, what has happened is of no surprise to you. Obviously, we've been anticipating this for a long time, long before it was on most commentators' radars. But it's still surreal nonetheless. Today I want to talk about how we can prepare for the knock-on effects of what's about to unfold, because in the days ahead, things are going to become incredibly unstable. It could so happen that one side capitulates, and then we might enter into a new era of geopolitical stability, or the opposite could happen, and we could be entering a whirlwind of turmoil. So we need to talk about what we can do right now. We know it's going to get bad. It's going to get worse. If you want the updates, if you want to stay ahead of the information curve and you want to know what's going to happen next, go and check out the Prepper News channel. I'll post a link in the description and the pinned comment. You got to go there and you got to subscribe. But here on the Canadian Prepper channel, we need to focus on not only what we can do to prepare, but what sort of lessons can we be deriving from all of these events, these crises that have been unfolding over the last 5 years, because so many lessons should be learned from what has emerged. We're in an endless sequence of crisis, it seems. And isn't it coincidental that these supposed riots and the military presence that's supposed to accompany them over the weekend just happens to converge on the same weekend that quite possibly one of the biggest wars of our generation starts. So we're entering a period of great uncertainty. That's a given. What can we do to prepare for it? One of the first things we need to do to prepare is we need to assess the risk. So what is the risk to us over here in the West? I would venture to say that hybrid warfare, covert warfare, especially when things get down to the wire for one side or the other and it looks as though they're going to lose, that's when they're going to start burning some of their 0 days. A 0-day exploit is a term they use in cyber security to describe a vulnerability in a system that's been discovered but hasn't been executed upon as of yet. So there's several vulnerabilities in our society, be they vulnerabilities in our power grid, vulnerabilities in our supply chain, vulnerabilities in our grid, our telecommunications grid, on the internet, the banking system. So I would expect that there are going to be major service disruptions from here on in. In fact, I'm anticipating any moment now that the lights are just going to go off. If I'm being brutally honest, sorry, is that a little bit of the Prepper News coming out? It probably is. Here's what we can do. The first thing that you need to do is go get some cash out of the bank, okay? Because you need to understand, and this seems like really rudimentary advice, and I know it is, but it's very important because I know most people just don't do it. It's inconvenient to handle cash nowadays. There's only a certain amount of money in those ATMs, and it ain't much, and it's gonna dry up quick. And there really ain't that much money in the bank nowadays. Maybe 100,000, maybe 200,000. If you want to take money out of the bank, you need to let them know in advance. And there are going to be limits on how much cash you can take out. If there is any turmoil with the banking system, which there very well could be, we've seen that happen even in the best of times in the last few years. Well, I don't know if I call the last few years the best of times, but you get my point. There has been outages, and that could be happening again, and it could in fact be sustained. You are going to need a means of transacting if there is no ATMs, if there is no electricity. How are you going to get your money out of the bank? How do you know that there's not going to be a cyber attack that just wipes the slate clean and all your money is gone? I mean, it could happen. I'm not saying it will happen. I'm just saying that these are one of the things. We are now entering a period of turbulence that could potentially spill over and just cause a shakeup in everything, including the global financial system. And as a consequence of that, you might not have access to money if it's all on zeros and ones in a screen. So take some cash out of the bank. Silver and gold, that's going to be great for 3 to 6 months down the road when we go Mad Max. But for now, just do that, because online payment systems, especially if you're in an acute crisis, okay, you can maybe still transact with your zeros and ones on Amazon, but what if you need something this instant? And what if there's panic buying in the stores? Now, hopefully, you've already prepared. You've been watching the Canadian Prepper for years. There I go, referring to myself in the third person again. You've been watching the channel for years. But you always forget something. That's what you realize. You can always get that last minute stuff. So make sure you do that. You also need to potentially prepare for a power outage. This is even more concerning if there's some element of electricity that powers something that sustains life. So if you live on an acreage, for example, and you're wired into the grid, you need electricity to power that water pump, to power that septic so you don't get septic issues backing up. You might even live in a situation where you're in a high-rise building and you rely on air conditioning. And maybe for whatever reason that high-rise building doesn't have access to ventilation. So you're going to be, basically cooking in that place. So you have to think of all of these potentials. We're also entering summer, which means it is going to be incredibly hot. So AC is going to be putting extra strain on the power grid as is. Should there be any disruptions, it's going to get a lot worse. And of course, if you have elderly people in your home who are highly susceptible to things like heat stroke, then you're going to want to keep these things in mind. So there's plenty of off-grid power systems and even portable AC systems now. I'm not going to say we sell them at CanadianPreparedness.com, but we do. We've reviewed them on the channel before, in fact. And they actually work surprisingly well, and they're low power drain. But you can get these from anywhere. A low-powered AC in the summertime could mean the difference between life and death for some people, depending on where you're living. Now, fuel shortages is another thing. There's a limited amount of gasoline and diesel out there. So I would strongly recommend, if you have a few jerry cans, the gas is going to last 6 months to 12 months. Just put it aside. It'll even last longer if you get some fuel stabilizer. Fill up your tank, fill up a few jerry cans. It's not going to hurt, because if there is a power outage, if there is a service disruption of any sort, it could potentially disrupt the flow of fuel trucks to gas stations, which again, they're going to start limiting the amount of gasoline. We just recently did a video on this topic where we talked about how much resource, whether it's money in the bank, electricity that's available, telecommunications, bandwidth, or fuel. And the amount of fuel that's available, we roughly estimated to be around 2 gallons per person. But that's assuming that's 2 gallons per person in any major city. So every gas station has about 10,000 gallons. There's about 1 gas station per 5,000 people. And that's assuming that those gas stations are full. But we must assume that they're probably half full, right? Because they get resupplied every few days. So assuming they're relatively half full, then you're looking at 1 gallon of gasoline per person, depending on what you're driving. Probably not going to get you too far. So make sure you stockpile some gasoline. In terms of medication, if you have chronic medication and you don't have an emergency supply, understand that we are now in a situation where we could see supply chain disruptions. The majority of that stuff comes from India and China. And even if it doesn't, a supply chain disruption or a war could cause increased demand on said medication. So there's plenty of services that we've talked about on the channel before, including Jace Medical, where you can go and you can get your medications, and you can even get antibiotics, which will be lifesavers in an SHTF situation, and that will prevent you from having to go and sit in a crowded doctor's office, and it takes stress off the system. So everything we are doing now, you are doing your society a service, because in a time of emergency, you are not going to be a burden on the government, who I assure you is incredibly ill prepared to deal with these issues. In terms of communications, now this is an interesting one. You need to be wary of fake news, deep fakes, and the more general term is propaganda. If there is a power outage, a cyber attack, when the lights come back on, Be highly suspicious of the messages that you are getting on your phone. In fact, at this point in time, I would be highly suspicious of phone calls from numbers that you don't recognize, because anything can happen. I mean, I'm expecting some kind of big hack where everybody's phone rings at the same time and it puts a virus on it, and something like that. We're just bound to have something like that happen. There are zero-day exploits out there that are going to be burned someday. The biggest of cyber attacks have yet to be executed yet, because the countries are saving them for when they're going to need them most, which is when their back is up against the wall, or what I proverbially call day X, okay? So be very wary of the messages that you're getting in periods of emergency. Both sides of these conflicts are going to be running psychological operations. All war is based on deception, and the people who know that and hone that skill, they're the ones who typically win. This is why, as you're seeing unfold in the news reports of Israel and Iran, immediately you'll always have these exaggerated reports that are later deemed to be false. And the reason for that is to sow chaos and fear in either side. So it's imperative that you cross-reference anything that you are seeing. Go to reputable sources. If you want to know what's really going on, go and follow me on X, okay? And that's where you'll get the real side. Pretty much I have like a 99% accuracy rate in terms of the things that I repost and the stuff that I upload on there. And what I mean by that is 1% of the time, in the flurry of news and explosions going off, you accidentally post something that maybe is a video from years ago. But I follow some very trusted accounts and I aggregate all that data, and I try to stay on top of things. But if you want the summary, the World War III updates, the purpose of those isn't just to, give the breaking news and sit there and you watch me react to it. I don't find that particularly useful, because you can do that yourself. The purpose of that is to talk about what's going to happen next, okay? And should I get into it? No, I won't get it. I was almost going to go off on a rant, on a speculative rant, but I will say this. The war is going to intensify, and it's going to end when one side wins. Okay? Is that fair enough? Now, in terms of food shortages, this is something else that we could see prices spike for food, because, of course, all food price is dictated by the price of energy. So if the farmers need to pay more to get the food, buy oil, gasoline, diesel, petrochemicals, then that food is going to cost you more. And we are going to see price spikes in food. They're estimating potential oil prices of $120 a barrel. Now, I think that is under the circumstances that Iran's oil is knocked offline, and potentially maybe some others. Maybe there's delays in getting out oil tankers from the Strait of Hormuz. But if we're talking about a full blockage of the Strait of Hormuz, you will likely see oil shoot up much, much higher. And the reason for that is that 30% of the world's oil, between 20 to 30, it depends on the month, goes through the Strait of Hormuz. Now, if it is mined and that oil needs to be transported in another method, and if you have missiles landing on oil and gas infrastructure in the Gulf states, in Saudi Arabia, if they get involved as a result of Iran deeming them complicit, as acting as a staging ground for attacks on Iran, the United States and Israel, of course, then you're going to see oil go much, much higher. It's not going to be proportionate, like, 30% of the world's oil is taken off the market, ergo 30%, it's going to cost us 30% more. That's not how it works. It's a bidding war, okay? So that just means, how much more do I want that gallon of gasoline than you? And there's going to be people who are willing to pay a lot more for that gallon of gasoline, until people are not willing to pay any more. Until the price gets too high, that's when the price hikes will decrease. So the price of gasoline is going to go up, and as such, the price of food is likely to follow. So try to stock up on food. in the very least, go and check out one of your wholesale food stores. These are places like Costco. Costco, you know, I don't know how cheap it really is, to be brutally honest. Some things are cheap, but I find that I go there and I go there for like 5 or 6 things and it ends up costing me $1,000 for some reason. If you go to, like in Canada here, we have the Real Canadian Wholesale Store. You can get some pretty good deals on stuff. That's where the restaurants shop, okay? So just go get some bulk staple grains, some potato flakes, something that's gonna be, you know, shelf stable for a long period of time, and just buy bulk. And even if you can't put it in a food grade bucket and Mylar bags right away, it's still going to last, you know, as long as it's the envelope that you're putting it in is not prone to pests. It should be fine for a long time. But I would encourage you to wrap it up as well. We're going to see, like I said, a lot of financial turbulence, and it's going to have knock-on effects for China as well, because the increased oil price will increase costs for China, and it is going to be destabilizing politically in the already tumultuous relationship between the Chinese and the Americans. So the problem with these conflicts flaring up is that one conflict will always exacerbate another. So as I indicated in my video that I posted on the Prepper News today, the Russians are already talking about mobilizing 1 million more men as a result, or at least many high-ranking generals are calling for as much, as a result of the decapitation strike attempt that was just witnessed in Iran. They are very concerned that the war with NATO is only going to intensify, okay? So for that reason, we got to prepare for those uncertainties. Now, I quickly want to talk about the things that we've learned from this. One of the things that I've learned from the Iran-Israel conflict in particular is these clandestine operations that were meticulously conducted by the Israelis over very long periods of time. The patience that they had to exhibit in order to effectuate and make sure that these operations were successful. You know, I mean, we're talking about months, if not 18 months, I think, for the Ukrainian preparation for that operation. So these things take a long time to plan. And if you really, you know, if you think about it, they could have allocated those resources or those drones. They could have used those drones on, you know, a guy in a trench somewhere. But instead, they went for high value targets. So, you know, what we learned from that is that with patience and planning, it's going to take a long time, but you're going to get a much better return on your investment. I'm sure there's some life advice to extract out of that somewhere. But in addition to that, what was demonstrated, and this is not a statement of ethics or morality, what was demonstrated was leadership. We've seen cunning, the willingness and the determination to see a plan through despite whatever near-term ethical repercussions might have been the consequence of it. And that might not sit well with some people, but in the cutthroat world of geopolitics, where it's life or death, if you hesitate, you die, okay? And if you are complacent and if you don't play to win, you die. If you decide to congregate with all of your highest ranking officials in one area, although the jury is still out on this, like the Iranians did, then you're probably going to die, unfortunately. So you gotta, you know, use your head, be vigilant, be paranoid. The smartest people in the world are the most paranoid. That doesn't mean they're freaking out and peering through their windows and they're not converting that paranoia into something useful. The most successful people I've ever met are just constantly anxious. Okay, and you can see that in a lot of these big tech people. They're anxious people. It's because they're always thinking, they're trying to see all the angles. And Iran just didn't see the angles. They got complacent, they got comfortable, and they succumbed to their own normalcy bias. So you have to think in 4 dimensions. You need to, dictate the pace of things, and you need to be on the initiative. That's another thing. Don't just sit there and turtle in and wait to be a victim. You need to have good operational security and digital hygiene, as Hezbollah found out not too long ago. Those things are so important. You got to play to win. And when it comes down to a survival situation, you have to have that deliberation. You have to be willing, and you have to know exactly what you're capable of. We had Tom Marazzo on recently. I would encourage you to go and watch that video. And he was talking about knowing what you're prepared to do before you're put in a situation. Because if you're in a situation which is life or death, and heaven forbid, it comes down to it's either me or them, you need to know how far you're willing to go in that situation beforehand. You need to have already made that decision. If all the boxes are checked, you execute, possibly literally. Now, nobody wants that. And obviously, all of this is happening within the dictates of the law. So we would never encourage you to do anything illegal. We're just saying that you need to already have that determination to know what you're capable of and to know that you're going to execute when the time comes, and that you're not going to hesitate, because that hesitation could be life or death. And be vigilant, be a little bit paranoid. It's fine. This day and age, if you're not paranoid, you're not getting ahead. Fear is arguably the driver of all success in a strange way, because it's how you escape dangerous things. And of course, if you want to build something, and if you want to get ahead in life, then that requires a certain precariousness around things that could be potentially harmful to you. So all I can say right now, my friends, is that we need to be incredibly vigilant with everything in our lives, because everything can change in a moment's notice. It may so happen that this situation will fizzle out. As crazy as that seems, that might happen. We might see capitulation in the next few hours, in the next few days. Who knows? But already the fuse is lit. So we know that even if this situation is resolved, they've now set off another chain reaction of potentially negative outcomes that someday are going to come to fruition, and those are going to be problematic for everybody. So we need to prepare for uncertainty, and go and watch the video that we released with Tom Marazzo. In addition to that, go and watch the video that we released where we talk about what is available in a time of crisis. And it might enlighten you to how little there actually is out there when you need it, which is why you need to stay ahead of the panic curve. Don't be a panic prepper. Everybody's going to be a prepper at some point. You're either a prepper now or after SHTF. And I wouldn't want to be a prepper after SHTF, because that means you're likely looting a store somewhere. Go check out the Prepper News, guys. Link is in the description below. Thanks for watching. And let's just hope for the best. Canadian Prepper out.